Good morning. I'm Roxana Lester. Rev Lisa Doege is preaching and leading our service this morning. Our worship and covenant group theme for the month of January is the Gift of Liberating Love. Working to build a diverse, multicultural, and beloved community, we celebrate the presence and participation of all, regardless of race, gender, identity, sexual orientation, abilities, ethnic, or national origins. We welcome you on YouTube and on site, whoever you know yourself to be, and wherever you are in your journey. We're glad to have visitors this morning, both remotely and on YouTube. So if you're visiting us in the sanctuary, if you'd like to say hello, if you would stand, we have somebody with a microphone who will help us all hear better, and we would like to welcome you. Do we have any visitors?
Or raise your hand.
Or raise your hand. Do we have any? There's somebody with a hand raised.
Hello, I'm Stephen. I'm from East Tennessee. I'm here on a family obligation this weekend, and I'm glad to be able to find a UU here.
Welcome. Anyone else? There's another hand in the back.
Hi, I'm Roseanne, and my wife Liz and I have recently moved to the area, and we're just checking things out.
Welcome. Anyone else on this side? All right. Do we have anybody on this side who's new to us or would like to say hi? Oh, we do have one more. Sorry. Oh, we got a couple more. Good.
Came here about 2015 and was nesting across the street in a garden-level apartment for about a month. So how could I not come to this church? And when somebody asked me and the other visitor that was here with me that day, where are you from? There was a Chinese girl stood up. She said, oh, my name Minghua. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I stood up and I said, my name is Philip Milano. I'm from Dover Plains, New York, which is a very small town. After the service, a woman dressed to the nines, very elegant lady, came out in the back and she said, oh my God, when I heard you say Dover Plains, I grew up in that town. And my daddy built that hospital. And it happened to be a hospital that I worked in when I was 20 years old. What a small world. Maybe she's here around today, I don't know. Her name is Ashley. I think it was Ashley Thompson.
Welcome. Welcome. I bet it was Abigail Thompson. I think we have one more over here. Did I see another hand? Okay. Anyone on this side? All right. So it's good to have you all with us. If you're here on site, we hope you join us in our social hall after the service. To get there, you can go out and around the building. You can go right through here, and it'll take you outside, or you can ask the usher or follow the crowd. We have two cards in the pew in front of you that help us gather information if you're willing to fill it out. The Rainbow Chalice card, you can use the QR code or the space provided to write your contact information. We promise not to flood you with information, but if we have your email, we can send you things, and our minister will write you a letter and say hi. To share our joy or sorrow, please use the card with the red heart and the chalice. And we'll read those later. If you'd prefer not to have them read out loud, just say that, and I will not read it out loud. So put them in the collection plate, either one. Our church announcements, we have a really good method now on Tuesday and Friday. We send out an email blast that just lists what's happening this week, and it's really a good way to get details. But I'll hit the highlights, especially because tomorrow's MLK Day, and we have a lot of things going on. The parade will be represented there. You can talk to Brett Highland after the church service if you'd like to find out more, but essentially it starts at 10, but you need to get there early. Parking is a mess, so those of you who are visiting, if you're trying to drive around town tomorrow, good luck. from 10 to 12. After 12, it clears. Then people will be here for our wonderful concert. David's been working hard. The choir's been working hard. It's going to be beautiful. So to get ready for that, we need some help right after church. If anybody wants to add some muscle to help just rearrange some piano and a couple of things. Yeah, you don't have to lift the piano. It's on wheels. So you don't have to be super person to help us out. Tomorrow, the concert is at 2 o'clock. So the parade's at 10, the concert's at 2. Please join us for our Music Alliance members next Sunday, the 21st at 3 p.m. as we welcome vocalist Jane Ogle and her fabulous Southern Holiday Jazz Band, which features our own Bill Smith on guitar and backup vocals. Tickets are available on Eventbrite for $25 or $30 at the door. We have a starting point class coming up. Those of you who are interested in learning more about the church, again, if you can come around and have coffee with us and check up on that if you're not on the eBlast schedule right now. And we're also continuing having our meetings about bringing Reverend Lisa on as a full-time cult minister. So we want everybody to be able to participate in those. With our lighting of the chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith, we enter into sacred time. Our chalice lighter this morning is Brett Highland, and I chose him so that you would see him and know he's the person to talk to about Martin Luther King afterwards. The Flames of Love by Reverend Kimmy Floyd Rice. We light the flame of commitment to stand with and work to create change until all know they are beloved. We light the flame of survival, grateful for our lives. Remembering in love those lost along the road, we light the flame of change, committing to recenter toward love. In hearts, in minds, in our world, we light the flames of hope, loving each other, building community, even when it is uncomfortable. We light the flame of knowledge, following the path of justice, justice that is love embodied. We light the flame of radical love, to speak out for those who have been silenced, those who have been rejected for who they love, those who have been persecuted for who they are, those who have been bullied for daring to be bold, those who have been othered and forced into margins, those who have been lonely, those who have been hurt, those who are still hurting. We light this flame as a people committed. We are survivors. We will change the world. Until no one lives without hope, until no one lives without justice, we light this flame and pledge in love, with love, and through love, all things are possible.
Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. Therefore, heeding the wisdom of the man we honor today, we come together in religious community to access our power and to wed it to our love, to the end that justice might prevail wherever it is now absent, oppressed, or hidden. Come, let us worship together. Will you please rise in body or in spirit for hymn number 131, our hymn of the month, Love Will Guide Us. time now for our story. Anyone who would like to see the pictures may come forward. Our story this morning is called Good Night Racism. It's kind of a bedtime story in the morning, but maybe tonight when your grown-ups tuck you in, you can talk about what you heard in the story. Outside the windows, peeking down from the night sky, the moon watches over us. She sees kids smiling at dinner tables and yawning in their beds. But some kids do not have food, do not have beds, because of unfair rules and unjust treatment. The moon sees all kids, whoever they are, wherever they are, and shines her light on them. The moon wants her light to kiss every child goodnight. The moon delights when every child falls asleep, because the moon knows when we sleep, we dream. When we dream, we imagine what is possible, what the world can be, and the moon glows a little brighter, whispering, "Dream, my child, imagine, my child, a new world, a new future awaits." A world where all people are safe, no matter how they look, how they worship, or how they love. A world where all kids have the same chance to have peace, to have joy, to have a childhood. A world where all people breathe fresh air and have what they need to feed their minds and their bodies. A world where our rules open doors, open minds, and create equity and justice for all. Dream, my child. Create, my child. A new world, a new future awaits. Good night, unfair rules. Good night, cruelty. Good night, injustice. Good night, inequality. Good night, hate. Good night, hurt. Good night, racism. Good night. Thank you for listening. We'll sing you on your way to religious education.
The offering that we take each Sunday isn't just a stale habit. It's an opportunity to recommit to this place, to these people. Our offering is an affirmation, a yes. When we give, we say yes to something we value. To donate via debit card, credit card, you can use the QR code on the back of the order service, or you can always go to Savannah.org to donate. Hit the donate button. Checks are great. Cash is great. We thank you for your generosity. The offering will be now gratefully received. We have one sorrow that was passed on today. Athena Newar is sister-in-law of Carol Presser. She's very loved and missed by all who knew her. Let us hold our joys and sorrows, spoken and unspoken, in our hearts as we join together in the responsive reading found in your order of service. Sorrow is everywhere, yet joy is reborn. As we mourn together, so we celebrate together and offer thanks that we are not alone. So may it be now and in all the days to come.
Let us continue in a spirit of meditation. The words of meditation this morning are written by the Reverend Tess Baumberger and are based on the Christian scripture in 1 Corinthians. Love is kind with people, but impatient with injustice. Love is assertive and respectful. Love listens to the anger of those who experience oppression without responding, without defending, without interrupting, without explaining. It listens with compassion, seeking always to understand. Love is slow to anger, especially at the start or end of life, and with anyone who the world discounts. Yet anger can be a part of love. Consider the force with which parents defend their young. Love fears those it loves, love fears for those it loves, for what it loves. When, who, or what it loves cannot defend itself, love rises to defend. When those it loves have the power of defense, it takes their lead with humility and courage. Love assists, empowers, and frees. Love's anger rises to meet injustice in considered ways that help correct it. Love is willing to examine itself, its thoughts, actions, and unmediated bias. It recognizes one's power to harm or to be part of systems of harm with or without awareness. But once aware, it can only intend to make amends, to right the wrongs, to change the systems that legislate hatred. Love is willing always to change, always to learn, always to heal. Love rejoices in truth and in equity. There is no limit to love's steady presence or its holding us gently but insistently to what is right. Amen. Feels strange, doesn't it, not to have the choir over there, but I'm glad they're saving their voices for tomorrow's concert, which will be magnificent. Our first reading this morning from Unitarian Universalist lay leader Aisha Ansano, The Flawed Understanding of Martin Luther King Jr. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a radical. He was called the most dangerous man in America by the FBI and had a 17,000-page FBI file at the time of his death. It wasn't just KKK members or those in positions of power who disagreed with him or hated him. As Cornel West explains in his book, The Radical King, by the time of King's death, most of the country didn't like him. Quote, there was intense FBI pressure, including attempts to make him commit suicide, end quote. West continues, the black civil rights leadership was trashing him, the white establishment had rejected him, the young black revolutionaries were dismissing him. Over the course of his life, King was not a man who was loved by most. In fact, he was hated by a select few. He was an incredibly maligned man by the time he died, and yet we never talk about that. Instead, we praise and honor him and hold him up as the highest standard of the struggle for justice. We as a society measure all who struggle for justice against Dr. King, but not against who he actually was. We measure those who struggle for justice against who we have decided Dr. King was, a sanitized version of the actual man. As a society, we tell activists that their protests are too unruly, their demands too harsh, their voices too strident, their methods too stringent. We have decided as a society that there is one way to struggle for justice, and it's the way we like to imagine King struggled for justice, even though it's not the way he actually did. In the summer of 2016, protesters took to the streets around the country, condemning police brutality and proclaiming that Black Lives Matter. As it happened over and over again, as has happened over and over again with these sorts of protests, many people criticized their methods and tactics. In a press conference, Atlanta Mayor Kasim Reed stated, Dr. King would never take a freeway. Anyone remember the powerful thing King organized? The marches from Selma to Montgomery? The ones that entailed several hundred people walking down a highway and crossing a bridge, blocking cars from being able to drive on it? The flawed understanding of King is everywhere, and it has seeped into our society's understanding of what is acceptable or appropriate in the struggle for racial justice. Our second reading from May Sarton, her poem, Easter, 1968. Now we have buried the face we never knew. Now we have silenced the voice we never heard. Now he is dead, we look on him with awe. Dead King, dear martyr and anointed word. Where thousands followed, each must go home into their secret heart and learn the pain. Stand there on rock and utterly alone come to terms with this burning, suffering man. Torn by his hunger from our fat and greed, and bitten by his thirst from careless sloth, must wake, inflamed to answer for his blood with the slow-moving, inexorable truth that we can earn even a moment's balm only with acts of caring and fierce calm. Head of an African, vital and young, The full lips fervent as an open rose, the high domed forehead full of light and strong. Look on this man again. The blood still flows. Listen once more to the impassioned voice till we are lifted on his golden throat and trumpet call of agony and choice, lifted out of our hesitating shame and doubt. Remember how he prayed before the task. Remember how he walked, eyes bright and still, unarmed, his bronze face shining like a mask, through stones and curses, hatred hard as hail. Now we have silenced the voice we never heard. Break open, heart, and listen to his word. Will you please turn now to the responsive reading in the back of your order of service, which I didn't write down the number. Yeah, 584. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. There are some things in our social system to which all of us ought to be maladapted. We must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. Before it is too late, we must narrow the gaping chasm between our proclamations of peace and our lowly deeds which precipitate and perpetuate war. We must pursue peaceful ends through peaceful means. Here end the readings. Will you rise in spirit or in body for our hymn number 170, We Are a Gentle, Angry People? We will sing verses 1, 2, 4, and 5. We're not going to sing all 6 verses. 1, 2, 4, and 5. when I hear or read or speak those words we just read of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. about the inescapable network of mutuality, I often think of Jesus saying, "Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did it to me." Or sometimes the less eloquent adage, "What goes around comes around." But lately I've been hearing this instead. For want of a nail, a shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, the horse was lost. For want of a horse, the rider was lost. For want of the rider, the battle was lost. For want of a battle, the kingdom was lost, and all for the want of a horseshoe nail. Or, to put it another way, truly whosoever we expect of the greatest, whatsoever, let's start again. Or to put it another way, truly whatsoever we expect of the greatest of these our leaders, visionaries, and prophets, that we must expect also of ourselves. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly doesn't mean only that the fate of any one of us is the fate of all of us. I believe it also means that the responsibility of any one of us is the responsibility of all of us. It is absolutely right and good that Martin Luther King Day is a federal holiday, that we honor the man's life and legacy tomorrow with parades and speeches, worship and music and breakfasts. But I believe the honor we seek to bestow is both flawed and diminished, not simply because, as Aisha Ansano says, we soften and sanitize him, forgetting his radical power, dangerous to the status quo of his time and our time, but also because we forget that he too was but one thread in an inescapable network of mutuality. The Reverend Dr. King was the first president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, but just a month earlier, over 60 people from 10 states were present at the conference that created the Southern Leadership Conference on Transportation and Nonviolent Integration, the organization that evolved just a month later into the SCLC. We've seen picture after picture after picture of Dr. King at the front of those several hundred people crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge at the start of the third and finally successful march from Selma to Montgomery. But those several thousand made the march history. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech is what most people remember of the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, but he was neither the only speaker nor the primary organizer of the event. The march was conceived of by A. Philip Randolph and the cooperation of Roy Wilkins of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, Whitney Young Jr. from the National Urban League, James Farmer of the Conference of Racial Equality, John Lewis of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, along with Dr. King of the SCLC, were integral, each of them, to its success. And each of these men also spoke at the event, along with the Very Reverend Patrick O'Boyle, Archbishop of Washington, Dr. Eugene Carson Blake, representing both the United Presbyterian Church and the National Council of Churches, Mrs. Medgar Evers, now known as Merle Evers Williams, Walter Reuther, representing the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Industrial Union Department of the AFL-CIO, Rabbi Uri Miller, President of the Synagogue Council of America, Matthew Amon, Executive Director of the National Catholic Conference for Interracial Justice, Rabbi Yakim Prinz, President of the American Jewish Congress, and Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, President of Morehouse College, all spoke that day. The event wouldn't have happened at all if it weren't for the planning of Bayard Rustin, who, along with a group of 200 volunteers, organized the march in just under 2 months from when he was named deputy director. That, incidentally, was far from Rustin's only contribution to the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s. He was a long-time and trusted advisor of Dr. King, one whose efforts and influence have at times been overlooked, ignored, or deliberately minimized because he was queer. As a second example, though Dr. Martin Luther King introduced mainstream America to nonviolent action, it was Bayard Rustin who spent 7 weeks in India a decade earlier studying Gandhian nonviolence, who deepened King's merely academic familiarity with the concept into an embodied belief that nonviolence was the means powerful enough to achieve the ends that seemed out of reach. Some of you may have heard an interview this morning on the radio with the actor who is playing Rustin in a new movie. Last month, I said that we put too much burden on the infant whose birth we celebrate at Christmas, that we make that baby too special, when in fact that baby, most properly understood, stands in for all babies, each born as the possibility of revolutionary love and peacemaking power. If he was the guy, no one else has to be the guy, least of all us. We do the same disservice to Dr. King when we forget that he was only one thread in the network. It is true, he was a nail for want of which the battle for civil rights in the 1950s and 1960s would have been lost. It is also true that Bayard Rustin, Rosa Parks, John Lewis, Whitney Young, and Ralph Abernathy were each a nail for the want of which the battles of those years would have been lost. And Marian Anderson, Mahalia Jackson, the members of the Eva Jesse Choir, all of whom sang at the Lincoln Memorial, were nails too, because movements require music as much as speeches and actions. And for each of those leaders whose names history records, there were thousands of nameless students, housewives, garbage collectors, folks who drove the bus boycotters, church choirs, song leaders, and sandwich makers. And each of them was a nail for the want of which the battles would have been lost as well. We honor Dr. King's life and legacy by remembering them, their dreams, their marches, their suffering at the spray of fire hoses, their songs. But here's the most important way, I believe, we honor his life and legacy. We realize that for all those nails that held the shoes, that protected the horses, that carried the riders, that contributed to the victory of the battles of lunch counters and the desegregation of interstate transportation and desegregation of public schools and voting rights, for all the battles won, the kingdom still cannot be declared ours, safe and free of bigotry, hatred, and oppression. That's the bad news. The good news is this: the inescapable network of mutuality doesn't spread merely across space, binding all the people of a nation or an era or a movement together in a single garment of destiny. It also spreads across time, meaning we today are also nails, for the want of which the kingdom will never be secured. If each of our failures to right injustice directly affects the least among us and indirectly affects all of us, so too do each of our acts of allyship, truth-telling, and justice-making. The network King described was never comprised solely of the consequences of injustice, hatred, and bitterness. It was always and continues to be comprised equally of the consequences of love and peace and hope. When we, called by love, buoyed by hope, pursue peace, even in ways that may seem insignificant in the face of the magnitude of the injustice at work in our society, then we change the very warp and weft of the single garment of destiny. In small group meetings for a couple of months past and several weeks still to come, members and friends of this congregation have been reflecting on the shape and character of ministry you want for the next phase of the history of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Savannah, and specifically how and if I might fit into that phase as your next settled, called minister. I've been reflecting too, more privately, on what I saw when I agreed to come here as your contract minister in August of 2022, and what I've observed since I've been here, and how I might continue to be together, how we might continue to be together as a congregation and a called, settled minister. One of the things I consistently see when I look at you is a community of folks who understand instinctively and urgently the importance of horseshoe nails and every other link in the chain along the way to winning the kingdom for peace and love, liberty and justice. You know that UUCS's participation in Justice Unites Savannah Together multiplies our influence for good in our surrounding community. You understand that becoming involved in the new UU Georgia Legislative Action Network will bring our love to bear in tangible and systemic and lasting ways on the least among us across our state. You believe that the interdependent web of all existence and the inescapable network of mutuality are one and the same. You keep doing the challenging work of anti-racism despite some language and vocabulary barriers and differing ideas about the direction the work should take. You gather food so children can eat on weekends, and you serve meals to families with parents working to stay out of jail because you know hunger weakens not just bodies, but families and communities, and kids need parents who aren't incarcerated. And you march at Pride and on MLK Junior Day because you know that celebration and solidarity and remembrance weave sturdy threads of joy and community and care into that garment of destiny. And you need, I believe, not so much a minister who will be the driving force behind your justice work, or in the language of this month's theme, a minister who will be the catalyst for your liberating love, but rather a minister who recognizes and celebrates the projects you imagine and undertake, the invitations you accept, and the opportunities you bring to the wider congregation. A minister who facilitates your work with staff and resources, who participates alongside you as time and the other demands of ministry allow, and who holds up all of your social action ministries and names them what they are, blessings, and the legacy of Dr. King in ways you may not even be conscious of. I can be that minister. I can be that nail in the little portion of the inescapable network that is UUCS. It's been a privilege to do so for these past 17 months, and it would be an honor to continue to do so as your settled minister. Hewing a stone of hope out of a mountain of despair is a monumental task, one that has already gone on too long, one for which the end is not yet in sight. How good it is to know that though our efforts are essential, the task is not ours alone and never will be. How good to remember we share the work with countless and nameless toilers, past, present, and future, fulfilling the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Amen. Will you please rise in body and in spirit and raise your spirits as we sing hymn number 162, Gonna Lay Down My Sword and Shield. Go out now with hearts and hands and minds renewed to the world that is waiting for you. Go out to the world to bring your gentle touch to those in pain. Go out to feed and house those in need. Go out to speak truth to those with power. Go out with courage to do the work which calls you. Go out now with your passion and faith to change the world. Amen.